Hey there, fishy friends. This is Chris with Chris Does Fish, and today I'm going to share with you my favorite rig for inshore saltwater in late spring, summer, and into fall. So in 5 short minutes, you're going to be able to tie your own rigs, save a bunch of money, and be filling up the boat when everyone else is getting skunked. So stay tuned. So as spring turns to summer, there's a couple of things that you'll notice. First, you'll see there's a lot more people on the water. As the temperatures warm up, people get out of their houses and onto the water. While more people means more awareness, we also have to realize that more people means fishing pressure. Fish are going to be a little apprehensive about taking whatever swims their way. We have to make sure that our baits look super attractive to our fish. The second thing, probably the more important one, is that the spawn's already happened and bait fish are all over the place. In the winter and into early spring, there's not as many bait fish. So our target species are going to be taking whatever works and whatever swims their way, which is why artificials work really well. Spring and summer, that's not always the case. There's a lot of bait fish. Fish are trying to fatten up, but at the same time, they've seen a lot of live bait running around. That's why in spring and summer, I go to a live bait rig. Now there's no harm in using live bait, although you don't see it a lot on YouTube. I think it's a great option when the bait's available. I like to catch the bait myself using a cast net, though again, there's nothing wrong with going to your local bait shop and picking up some live feeders. Again, you do what works best for you. What you'll see is I have just a couple of pieces of equipment that we'll go over. It's really simple to make your own rigs, and then with that you can adapt them to what you need. So let's go take a look at the equipment that we're going to need. Okay, so here we go. We have a couple of things. First we need is our main line. I like to use monofilament. Galveston is not the clearest of water, so this is Stren high impact monofilament. It's 20 pound. You don't need much higher than that for inshore. You can catch any redfish, trout, flounder that you want. On this guy in Florida, you can catch snook, although you might want to move up to a little bit higher if you're going for specifically snook. Monofilament's really great because it has a lot of stretch. If your water's really clear or it's winter and the fish are finicky, I would go with the fluorocarbon. This is 15 pound test. Fluorocarbon is great because it's a little bit clear, although it doesn't have as much stretch. In situations where the fishing's really tough, I'll go from the 15 pound down to 10 pound. Today I'm going to be tying my leaders with the monofilament. On one end we have our hooks. These are the Owner Inshore Slam. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. These are just what I happen to like. You can see here, see if I can get that in focus for you. There's this really distinctive bend to it. It's really hard for the fish to swallow this hook. And that, I mean, you're not going to get any gut hook fish. They're really solid hooks for everything else. They have a very, very sharp point. They are great for that. I generally stick between a 1/0. If I don't know what I'm fishing for specifically, I'll use the 1/0, which is great for trout and smaller redfish. If I'm really targeting the bigger reds, I'll go with the 3/0. I don't really see a reason to go with much else other than that. On the other end of our leader, we have swivels. These are Spro swivels. I really like these swivels. They're stainless steel. You can see that they're actually rated to 50 pounds, even though, let me get one out for you. Let me get those up there for you. They are absolutely tiny. This is 10 of them in that little package. So I really value the fact that Spro puts the test pound on the swivel itself as opposed to just making you look it up. A lot of other companies make big swivels, but are not nearly to that pound test. So this is a tiny little swivel. It doesn't detract away from the leader, won't attract a lot of attention. And they are stainless steel, so they're great in salt water. Two little deals. Oh, one last thing, a couple of last things. One, the weights. We use egg sinkers. This is just, you've seen these before, these dial weights. I like to use the 1/2 ounce is my go-to if you're not sure what to use. This is a 1/2 ounce weight. It's great for most fish. It'll keep them pretty much to the bottom. If you want to go a little bit lighter, you can go with something of about a 1/4 ounce. I would not go anything lower than a 1/4 ounce because then the fish will be able to outswim it and they're going to stay up and end up being on the surface, and that's when you're going to have problems with birds. You can go higher if your bait's really big. You can go up as high as you want. I just generally, my go-to is a 1/2 ounce. To protect the knots, I use beads. These beads, you see them all over the place. You can honestly salvage them from any rig that you used before. They pretty much don't break or go bad or anything else. This is actually a rattle trap box because it's a pretty good connection. I can feel confident opening and closing it and not getting beads everywhere. Color doesn't really matter. Most of them are red just because that's the colors that are out there. But you need a couple of beads. They really just protect the knots from the weight dinging into them constantly. And the last thing we're gonna do is peg the line. These are little bobber stops. They're by 6 Sense Lures, but a lot of companies make them. I just like 6 Sense because they're a really good company and I support them when I can. So these are bobber stops. They're really nice. You just put the line through it and you slide the stopper up. We'll show you how these work here in a bit. If you don't want to splurge on the $1.50 for the bobber stops, it is $1.50, or if you just lose them, you can tie your own knot with any fishing line you've got around and it'll work as a bobber stop. So yeah, so that's all the equipment that we're gonna need. I'll go ahead and get started and we'll see how this works. Okay, first and foremost, I do have to say that there are people that use a very simple method, and that's just a simple jig head. It's really not my favorite option. They'll just tie this onto their leader, hook their live bait onto this, and throw it out. I can't say that it doesn't work because I have caught fish on this method. A couple of things that are wrong with it though that I disagree with. First and foremost, you've got this big old thing hanging off your bait. It looks kind of weird, and like we were talking about with fishing pressure, you want to avoid this. It just looks a little off. So that doesn't really work for me. Next thing, your weight wants to sink down to the bottom. And if you have a weight heavy enough to keep your fish down, now your bait fish is going to be stuck right down at the bottom. If there's any seagrass in your area, you're also going to be catching every piece of seagrass that swims your way. Or I should say that you pull your way. You're going to get a lot of false strikes and you're just going to get hung up a lot. The last thing I can say is that this entire structure is very rigid. What that means is when you hook your fish, that fish is going to be swimming around and is going to be throwing this jig head all over the fish. That's going to tear a really big hole in your bait, and it's going to stress that bait out a lot. Your bait's probably only going to survive 1, maybe 2 casts, and you're going to go through a lot of bait really, really fast. With that said, this does work. All you have to do is tie a simple joiner knot like a uni knot, a Palomar knot, or a improved clinch knot, and you're in business. It's not my favorite rig, but if you're in a pinch, that will work. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is take some of our 20-pound monofilament, and I like to start off with about 3 feet. 3 feet is about 1 arm's length, so I'm just going to cut 1 arm's length of monofilament. Go ahead and tape this back. And for all these cuts, I like to use big nail clippers. They work really, really well in making clean, precise cuts, so I don't have anything left over. So now we have all of our equipment that we need. We have our about 3 feet of line. We have our 2 beads, our egg sinker. Because they're round, I'm just gonna set them over there so they don't roll away. We have on one end our 3/0 inshore slam hook or a K hook. We have our small swivel and some bobber stops. You can start on whichever end you want. I like to start on the non-sharp end, so the swivel. You can use any tight fitting knot you want. You can use a Palomar, or you can use a improved clinch knot. I'm gonna use the uni knot just because it's what I'm used to doing. It's what I like, and it's my show, so I can do it. Uni knot's really easy. It's just 5 little twists around. 2, 3, 4. And with the uni knot, the bigger the line, the fewer loops you need. If you're using some big old leader material, 4 is more than enough, sometimes even as low as 3. Okay, now that it's almost tight, just gonna grab it, pull it tight. And I even use, this is crazy, but I use this little doodad, and I just use that to hold it tight. All right, there we go. Again, nail clippers make it really nice, so I can just clip it very, very tight right up against the tag end. Nice close tag end. We're good there. Now, the first thing we're gonna add is a bead, just so that the weight doesn't bang up against the knot. Then we're gonna add the weight, and then another bead. It needs to come all the way down, right up against the weight there, or right up against the swivel there. Now what we're gonna do is add a bobber stop. These bobber stops are really easy to use. If you don't have any bobber stops, again, they're just $1.50, but if you don't have any bobber stops, you can take any larger line and tie essentially a uni knot, and it works the same way. So again, you just pass this line through here. I like to wet it just a little bit, but then all you do is, so once I pass this through, like so, I then take the bobber stop, pull it on, and you can see it's on two sides now, so I'm just going to keep pulling it, and now it came all the way through, and now it's only on one part. You can see there, now that bobber stop's just on one part of the line. It's very, very simple, and what's nice is now I can just slide it on down. Now I know it's black on a dark wood color, so it's hard to see, but this bobber stop now will keep these swivels here. You can move this as much as you want. Just for storage, I put it pretty close up, but when I'm fishing, I'll move it anywhere. It really depends on how high you want your fish. I usually recommend about 1/2 the total depth. So if you're in 4 feet of water, you want about 2 feet of line, so the fish can be about halfway up in the middle of the water column. You notice there's a little kink. That's okay, because we're gonna tie another knot here and clip this tag end off. So the last thing is just another knot here on this fishing line. You can do a Palomar knot. Again, because it's my show and I said I can, I'm gonna tie a uni knot just to keep it consistent. So the uni knot, we just make the loop. And we go 1, 1, 2, 3. Why does it never want to behave when I'm on film? 4, and number 5. Okay, always get it finger tight. You notice that it's not super tight on itself yet, and then you want to lubricate it. Again, nice part, just stick that through there. A nice pull, and now it's nice and tight. And then a little snip. And there you go. Now we have our complete rig all done. It's about, when all is said and done, it's about 2 feet. And I can move this bobber stop to go anywhere that I want it to. So let's go ahead and look and see how I'm going to store this rig for future use. Okay, so you can make as many of these rigs as you want. Here I have a fluorocarbon rig that I finished up. You can see it's the same exact system that we had with the mono, but instead we're using fluorocarbon. In order to store all these rigs, we don't want them getting mixed up and the wires all tangled up with each other. So to do that, we're going to use a pool noodle. There are lots of really fancy ways to store your bait rigs, but honestly, the pool noodle is probably one of the best. It's super cheap, which is always handy. It floats, which is, needless to say, has lots of positives there. You can cut it to whatever size you want. You can color code them if you want. They come in reds, greens, blues, purples, all sorts of different colors. So you can color code them, you can write on them. And what's nice is because they're foam, you can just take all these super sharp hooks and simply stick it in there. All of a sudden now that sharp hook is no longer a problem. When you're going to use it, you pull it out, and then when you're done, you stick it back in. It's very handy. So this rig is very simple. You can see all over it I have written live bait rigs. You got it written on the sides and whatnot, so I can see this in all these different ways. I also have it separated between monofilament and fluorocarbon. So my monofilament lines are on one side, my fluoro's on another, so when I'm out on the water, I don't have to think about which one is which. I don't have to stare at the line like an idiot because I can't figure out which one's mono, which one's fluoro. So to keep these separate, it's very, very simple. All I do is I take the weight end, I put a small hole, I slit the whole thing open. So I just take the hole, I just stick my weight, this is again a fluorocarbon, so we're gonna do it on the fluorocarbon side, and I stick it in the slit. I then just wrap the fluorocarbon around the pool noodle, And then once I'm to the end, I can just stick it closed. And now it's all nice and neat. And it's that simple. No longer do I have to worry about my lines getting tangled when it comes to using them. I can just unhook it, come out, and then you can see the line, the weights are just tucked right in there. When I'm done, just wrap it back up and give it a hook, and it's closed. It's that simple. Again, this was probably 5 cents worth of pool noodle. You can use these 1,000 different ways, and what's nice is even with all this weight on here, I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rigs on here. With all the weight, this is still gonna float even if this drops in the water. So, no worries there. So I hope that helped you out. This is a technique that I use all the time in the spring and summer. It gives me a lot of success. So, without much else, tight lines. See you out on the water, my friends.